Chapter 1091, Retreating After Fighting. Chapter 1091, Retreating After Fighting. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan inspected his immortal aperture. His divine sense was roaming the huge space inside his immortal aperture. All around, he saw barren land. I have too few earth path Dao marks. This barren terrain has few resources, most plants cannot be grown. To improve it, I will need to add earth path Dao marks. Other than that, all other methods do not solve the fundamental problem. Fang Yuan thought. The sovereign immortal aperture was too big, it surpassed common sense. Even if Fang Yuan's divine sense spread out completely, he would have to spend a lot of time. But when Fang Yuan inspected his immortal aperture with a focus and a target, his efficiency was greatly raised. Different divine senses were spreading towards different areas. Gradually, the resource points that Fang Yuan was managing were displayed in his mind. Western Desert had sandy terrain. There was a huge pit with charred sand surrounding it, the temperature was high. Inside the pit, there were a huge number of eerie fire dragon pythons coiling around, procreating. This was the first pit. Normally, eerie fire dragon pythons lived in clusters of 2 to 3. But here, Fang Yuan used the Northern Plains Dongfang tribe special method to raise them. He placed many eerie fire dragon pythons together, promoting the creation of more infant snakes. These eerie fire dragon pythons came from Dongfang tribe's blessed land previously. He had obtained this rearing method from Dongfang Changfan's soul. It was the original copy and had many fine details clearly stated in it. Because of this, the eerie fire dragon pythons were growing in numbers at a rapid rate. Several li away from this pit, there were 3 other pits. The number of dragon pythons in each pit was not fewer than the first pit. It has been less than a month outside, but the time inside here passes at 60 times the rate. I have quadrupled the number of eerie fire dragon pythons already. Fang Yuan nodded. 60 times the rate of time, it was terrifying. The eerie fire dragon pythons had been living in Hu immortal blessed land for a long time, but there was little growth in them. The result was far inferior to what Fang Yuan was seeing now. This was because Hu immortal blessed land was placed in the main world. The rate of time was much slower, the resources grew more slowly. The eerie fire dragon pythons were like this, so too were the dragonfish, regretful spiders, arrow bamboo forest, star fragment grass fields and others. They increased in scale to varying degrees. But in terms of quality, the arrow bamboo forest and star fragment grass were growing less well than in star form blessed land in terms of vitality. This was because the sovereign immortal aperture had fewer star path Dao marks than star form blessed land. When Gu immortals managed their immortal apertures, they had to inspect all aspects of the immortal aperture, to prevent missing something. Especially when immortal apertures were small and all sorts of resources were placed closely together, they might negatively influence each other's growth. But Fang Yuan's situation was fine. The sovereign immortal aperture had huge space, all sorts of resources had their respective environments, there was little chance of a problem occurring. When Treasure Yellow Heaven opens, I will sell these resources, the rewards will surely be promising. Fang Yuan concluded, feeling pleased. Treasure Yellow Heaven closing had a huge influence on him. He was trying to manage and construct resources points in the immortal aperture, but without Treasure Yellow Heaven, he could not buy much. Even though Xianxia Sec's inventory was huge, they were mostly Gu refinement immortal materials, they were not useful to Fang Yuan. Stopping the use of his divine sense, only one last part went towards Mini Northern Plains. This time, Mini Northern Plains was Fang Yuan's focus. Roar roar roar. In Mini Northern Plains, large numbers of snow monsters were roaming around. The further north he went, the colder the weather, there was even snow in the air. On the ground, there was a thin layer of frost. Fang Yuan observed carefully. The size of the snow had expanded since his last investigation. This was all due to the previous earthly calamity. Fang Yuan had undergone the first earthly calamity in the icy plain. It was powerful, but Fang Yuan also gained much from it. He obtained a huge number of ice and snow path Dao marks. Because of these Dao marks, many northern plains had snow falling from the sky. This environment suited the snow monsters more. Currently in many northern plains, there were countless ordinary snow monsters, large numbers of desolate beast snow monsters, and a small number of ancient snow monsters ruling them. Before transacting with Shadow Sect, Fang Yuan had planned to keep these snow monsters as a form of resource inside his immortal aperture. But after the transactions, Fang Yuan understood what Heaven's will was. He was determined to eliminate these snow monsters. Because these snow monsters were filled to the brim with Heaven's will. Fang Yuan came with killing intent. He mobilized his divine sense. A strength path immortal zombie brought along a large number of immortal essence as goo worms flew around the body. Sword path killer move, triple layered sword wave. The goo worms were used one by one. Immortal essence was expended. A moment later, a grand wave burst out. Rumble. The silvery sword wave charged out with countless ripples, giving off killing intent that was colder than ice. Ordinary snow monsters could not resist. They were engulfed by the sword wave and cut into pieces. The pieces were cut further into specks. Before being completely eliminated, nothing remained eventually. But those desolate beast snow monsters could resist. But they only lasted a few breaths of time before being destroyed by the sword wave. Sword path had extremely strong offense. It was one of the 5 strongest paths for fighting in the current Gu immortal world. Triple layered sword wave was an outstanding killer move. The wave of attacks became stronger each consecutive time. When Fang Yuan was undergoing tribulation, he used this move to kill the ruined bats made from snow, barely surviving. After 3 sword waves, he killed thousands of ordinary snow monsters and 6 desolate beast snow monsters. It was quite a good result. The thousands of snow monsters did not expend much of the sword waves. But the 6 desolate beast snow monsters, each one used up a lot of energy, causing the 3 waves to expend. Roar. Following a loud roar, a 70-feet snow monster rushed towards him with unbounded rage. Along with it, there were several desolate beast snow monsters and 10,000 ordinary snow monsters. A huge snow monster group charged forth like an army, towards Fang Yuan with killing intent. Fang Yuan moved the immortal zombie body, retreating. He was currently controlling this strength path immortal zombie to fight using his immortal essence and goo worms. This strength path immortal zombie was obtained from Blazing Heaven Demoness. Its immortal aperture had been destroyed long ago. Immortal essence and goo worms could only be brought alongside the immortal zombie. It was very unsafe for fighting. Thus, to eliminate these snow monsters, Fang Yuan chose to stay at range to attack them. This was a shameless tactic. Every fight was basically at a new location. After another fight, he would retreat again. The snow monsters charged imposingly, but when they arrived, Fang Yuan had already escaped, nowhere to be seen. The snow monsters' rage could not be vented. They growled loudly, causing vibrations in the air. The ancient snow monsters growled, throwing snowballs around, as they flew like meteors, scattering. Man is the spirit of all living beings. With a difference in intelligence, Fang Yuan held the initiative. These snow monsters could only take a beating passively. After getting to a safe distance, the strength path immortal zombie that Fang Yuan was controlling stopped moving, stopping to rest. Even though his body was uninjured, Fang Yuan paid a price. It was his green grape immortal essence. Activating triple layered sword wave used a lot of immortal essence. And his Xianxia sect contribution points. Because the immortal goo that formed triple layered sword wave included not just the core immortal goo, wave sword, but also other, water path immortal goo. Fang Yuan had to borrow these water path immortal goo from Xianxia land spirit. He had to spend a lot of sect contribution points. All in all, the cost of using triple layered sword wave once was high. But now, Fang Yuan had a lot of resources to trade. He had enough profits to sustain the immortal essence cost. In terms of sect contribution points, because of the trip to Tai Chiu, he had obtained a huge number of them. In the short term, they were not an issue. After resting, the snow monster group had settled down, before Fang Yuan started his slaughter again. I have to kill all of these snow monsters before the second earthly calamity comes. Otherwise, the calamities would make use of this and work together, would die in the second earthly calamity. Fang Yuan was aware of this. The calamities and tribulations of a Gu immortal become stronger and stronger each time. Fang Yuan's second earthly calamity was bound to be stronger than the first. If the snow monsters from the first earthly calamity remained, and coordinated with the second earthly calamity, Fang Yuan's chances of surviving would be slim, he would almost certainly get into a desperate situation. This was not the first time Fang Yuan had acted. More than 10 days had passed since he returned to Langya Blessed Land. Every day, Fang Yuan went to kill snow monsters. Snow monsters were dying on a large scale, their sizes were shrinking, but many were still left. Fang Yuan had to work harder. But if he killed many of them in one day, he would cause a huge commotion. Even though snow monsters had low intelligence, they had survival instincts. Other than growling to vent their anger, they could also communicate with one another and alert each other. After Fang Yuan attacked them multiple times, these snow monsters were alert already. They went under the protection of the ancient snow monsters, forming a tight defense. Fang Yuan could not attack easily. He withdrew the Strength Path Immortal Zombie and stopped killing snow monsters for the day. Placing his focus away from the immortal aperture, Fang Yuan stood up. He flew out of Cloud City. Soon, he came to Luopa Valley. Every day, he had to cultivate his soul. Lord Fang Yuan. Elder Fang Yuan is here again. You are really hardworking when it comes to cultivating, this is very admirable. In Luopa Valley, there were other Gu immortals. These hairy man Gu immortals were familiar with Fang Yuan, because he had guided them in combat tactics. Fang Yuan entered the valley, they took the initiative to greet him. Fang Yuan also replied to them politely. Thanks to the spy, Sixth Hair, Fang Yuan could get along well with these hairy man Gu immortals. Selecting a spot, after inspecting the area, Fang Yuan had his soul fly out, starting his cultivation. Pain was ingrained into his soul, causing it to tremble intensely. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, he was unwavering. After a long while, a few hairy man Gu immortals who were watching him talked among themselves after retracting their gazes. A cultivation maniac. It is hard to think that he can stay in Luopa Valley for 2 hours a day. This pain. I cannot even endure some minutes of it. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1092, Self-Will Gu. Chapter 1092, Self-Will Gu. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan's soul was roaming in Luopa Valley. He did not move far, only around the vicinity of his body. Once in a while, there would be bewilderment fog drifting towards him. Fang Yuan's soul was bathed in the bewilderment fog, he was like a book soaked in water, slowly opening up. The more condensed my soul is, the harder it is to loosen. After cultivating here for so many days, my soul is more than 10 times as condensed as before. This is an incredible improvement. However, compared to Spectral Soul Demon Venerable, this is truly insignificant. Fang Yuan assessed himself, thinking about the Battle of Tian Mountain once again. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was the founder of Soul Path. Even though he died, his soul remained. He still had the highest Soul Path foundation in the world. Spectral Soul's soul was condensed to a terrifying level. Ordinary souls were like illusory silhouettes, they could interfere with the mind at most, they could not affect the material world. But Spectral Soul was so condensed that he could resist the grand tribulation with his soul. The imposing appearance was stuck deeply in Fang Yuan's mind. Even though he lost his memories due to the pure dream reality seeker physique, this portion of his memories was not lost. Perhaps even if spectral soul came to Luo Pa Valley, the bewilderment fog would have no effect on him. Fong Yuan thought as he sighed to himself, when can I have this level of cultivation myself? If Fong Yuan's soul had the foundation of spectral soul, then even if the immortal zombie body had a strong trap, it would be useless. Bewilderment fog gathered and scattered. Soon, Luo Pa wind started to blow. Fong Yuan's soul was bathed in the wind, traces of wind cut his soul apart like steel threads. Pain that was greater than dying by 1,000 cuts made Fong Yuan's soul tremble. But Fong Yuan gritted his teeth, enduring this wind. This wind was not very strong, it did not last very long either. Fong Yuan could endure it. But if he encountered strong winds, Fong Yuan would retreat wisely, and keep his soul inside his body. With the protection of his body, Luo Pa wind's might was greatly reduced. After this wind passed, Fong Yuan's soul shrunk by 30%. To play safe, he returned to his body. Guts Gu. Guts Gu were shattered in Fong Yuan's immortal aperture, as they turned into a mysterious power that affected his soul. Soon, his soul became strong again. The injuries from his earlier cultivation vanished completely. Luo Pa Valley and Dang Hun Mountain were both sacred lands for soul cultivation. With these two in his hands, Fong Yuan's soul path cultivation level rose rapidly, he was improving immensely. Like this, after the bewilderment fog and Luo Pa wind, Fong Yuan's soul was tempered like steel, it became more refined and condensed. But he did not know when he could enter the immortal zombie body. 2 hours later, Fong Yuan's soul started to feel agitated. He wisely stopped his cultivation, his soul returned to his body and he left Luo Pa Valley. 2 hours was Fong Yuan's personal limit, he had learned it after cultivation multiple times. There were 3 aspects in soul cultivation. Everyone knew about strengthening the soul and refining the soul, but these were just 2 of them. There was a 3rd aspect, that was soul pacification. Strengthening the soul could make the soul grow. Refining the soul could make it more condensed and pure. And pacifying the soul was to allow rest and recovery. The 3 complemented one another, if one only focused on one aspect, they would lose out on a lot, it was not worth it. Among which, Guts Gu from Dang Hun Mountain were the best to strengthen the soul. Luo Pa wind and bewilderment fog were the best for soul refinement. And finally, the most effective way to pacify the soul was the pacifying soul soup in Bewitching Lake. Bewitching Lake was inside the door of life and death. In the legends, after Verdant Great Sun died, he had remained drunk by the riverside. The door of life and death is inside Shadow Sect's blessed land, and Shadow Sect's blessed land is at southern borders Etion Mountain, it is currently engulfed by the giant dream realm. Otherwise, if I could obtain the door of life and death, would be able to gather all 3 and cultivate my soul with the highest efficiency. Fong Yuan was only thinking about it. That giant dream realm was the greatest obstacle. Currently, he could not pass that obstacle no matter what. And most importantly, there was heaven's will. Fong Yuan's every action drew the attention of heaven's will. Even if he was going to act in the future, Fong Yuan would still be most wary of heaven's will. As he flew, Fong Yuan did not return to his cloud city first. He rushed to the 12th cloud city. Soon, he saw the hairy man Gu immortal 12th hair. Elder Fong Yuan, you are here. This is the self-will Gu that you wanted me to refine. Inspect them. 12th hair said in a warm tone. Fong Yuan waved his hand, keeping all of the self-will Gu, saying, no need for inspection. 12th elder, I trust you. 12th hair laughed, he was deeply moved. Before Fong Yuan left, he held his hand as he said with much gratitude, I have to thank you for giving me this chance to refine self-will Gu. Otherwise, when treasure yellow heaven opens, would not have the capital to buy desolate beasts. We are kindred spirits, this is a win-win situation, I hope we can continue to work together. Fong Yuan smiled as he replied. Of course. 12th hair replied candidly. After the transaction, Fang Yuan returned to his cloud city. Self-will Gu. In the room, Fang Yuan mumbled as he held a rank 5 mortal Gu. This Gu worm looked like a scorpion, it was tiny. It had a unique appearance, it looked like folded paper. In Fang Yuan's hand, it was very light. When it moved its limbs, there was a light sound, it moved very slowly around Fang Yuan's palm. Self-will Gu's recipe came from Shadow Sect. Fang Yuan was a complete otherworldly demon now, he was unaffected by heaven's will. But other Gu immortals or Gu masters were not like him, how could they resist heaven's will and prevent it from subconsciously affecting them? Shadow Sect gave him a solution, that was Self-will Gu. This was a wisdom path Gu worm, it could produce a special type of will, self-will. Using Self-will Gu to cleanse oneself, it could block and prevent the influence of heaven's will. This was an important part of Shadow Sect's research after a long period of experimentation to resist heaven's will. Fang Yuan obtained Self-will Gu's recipe in the transactions with sixth hair, he started refining it himself. But the result was not good. He was not a refinement path expert, he could not achieve much on his own. In particular, his time and effort were very precious, he could not waste time on refining Gu. Earlier, he refined change form immortal Gu because it was too significant to him. But although Self-will Gu was only a mortal Gu, Fang Yuan had a great need for it. Thus, after brief hesitation, he gradually felt that he should expose the recipe of Self-will Gu and give it to the hairy man Gu immortals from Xianxia sect, to get them to help Fang Yuan refine it. The price of asking Xianxia land spirit to help was too high and unnecessary. Among the hairy man Gu immortals in Xianxia sect, other than sixth hair, the rest were all willing to work for Fang Yuan. Because Fang Yuan was already close to them, or even had a good relationship. Also, Xianxia sect focused a lot on sect contribution points. After the trip to Tai Chiu, Fang Yuan had accumulated a lot of sect contribution points, the other hairy man Gu immortals needed them. 12th hair was not the only one of them, Fang Yuan also asked for help from other hairy man Gu immortals. He had set the Gu refinement fees to a very low price. It was not hard for Fang Yuan to do this. The hairy man Gu immortals were quite guileless, and most importantly, they were skilled in Gu refinement while having some unwillingness to fight, they were willing to accept Fang Yuan's missions. This was not the first batch of Self-will Gu that Fang Yuan obtained. After placing the Self-will Gu into his immortal aperture, Fang Yuan inspected the other Gu worms. He had shown a trusting and casual attitude with 12th hair, but he was a vigilant person, after receiving the goods, he inspected them carefully. After all, Xianxia sect had spies like sixth hair. Fang Yuan did not know that sixth hair was the final spy remaining. But he was cautious, he was wary of sixth hair as well as other potential spies. The inspection took some time, but compared to refining these mortal Gu himself, it was insignificant. After inspecting that there were no issues, Fang Yuan nodded, showing a look of admiration. These are refined by hairy man Gu immortals after all, the quality is really superb. Fang Yuan kept the Self-will Gu in his immortal aperture. Or rather, he sent them into mini northern plains. He activated them one by one, until these mortal Self-will Gu were expended. A large amount of Self-will swept through several battlefields, cleansing all of the heavens will inside. Other than those inside the snow monsters, the battlefield had none of heaven's will left. These Self-will Gu are the best weapon against heaven's will, but they are very flawed. They are only rank 5 and are one-time consumable Gu, they are gone after I use them. Fang Yuan sighed. He held deep suspicion towards this Self-will Gu recipe has to be an incomplete version. Even though Shadow Sect gave it to me, they surely have a better recipe. But in those transactions, I requested for too many things, this is the limit, I could not obtain a better recipe. Like this, Fang Yuan got rid of the snow monsters in his immortal aperture and used Self-will to get rid of the heaven's will. At the same time, he used Dang Hun Mountain and Luo Pa Valley to cultivate Soul Path. His Soul Path foundation was accumulating rapidly. Other than this, he even squeezed out some time to coach the hairy man Gu immortals in fighting. Secretly, he got familiar with his immortal Gu and practiced his killer moves. Treasure Yellow Heaven's closure was also a huge impact on Fang Yuan. The construction of his immortal aperture was forced to stop, even though Fang Yuan had the capital and plans. Days passed by. While Fang Yuan anticipated the opening of Treasure Yellow Heaven, the second earthly calamity gradually got closer. Langya Sek's plan towards Tai Chiu had never stopped. From time to time, Hairy Man Gu immortals received sect missions and used the transportation formation to head to Tai Chiu. These Hairy Man Gu immortals' first mission over there was to change the environment and stabilize the transportation Gu formation. What made Fang Yuan feel strange was, these Hairy Man Gu immortals did not face any difficulties, it was smooth sailing, Heaven's will did not seem to be targeting them. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1093, Rejection. Chapter 1093, Rejection. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Langya Blessed Land, Cloud Cover Continent. In the first Cloud City, Langya Land Spirit was attending to Fang Yuan. Here, Fang Yuan, have some tea. This is the famous Fire Rainbow Tea. Langya Land Spirit said with a warm expression. Fang Yuan received the cup, he saw that this cup of tea was glowing with a red light. Looking closely, there seemed to be a rainbow inside, swimming around like a fish, moving up and down in a jolly manner. Fang Yuan had 500 years of experience, he had a trove of knowledge. Ordinary tea needed to be drunken slowly and appreciated. But this tea was different, one had to gulp it in one mouthful. Most importantly, it was the rainbow inside the tea, after drinking it, one could taste the true fire rainbow tea. Fang Yuan held the cup as he looked at the tea, he did not drink it. His current body was very outstanding, at once, countless thoughts churned in his mind, he was pondering deeply into an idea. The current Langya Land Spirit liked drinking fire rainbow tea. The previous Langya Land Spirit drank cloud smoke tea instead. The two types of tea showed the difference in the personalities of both Langya Land Spirits. The main ingredient of the cloud smoke tea was float ball tea grass. This was planted in Tai by Yun Sheng's blessed land, as his main resource. This float ball tea grass floated in the sky, it was not ordinary. Float ball tea grass was quite high-end, because it grew in the sky, mortals could not pick it. But in northern plains, there was a type of tea flower that grew from the ground and was deeply liked. It was the milk tea flower. This type of flower grew in the plains of northern plains, there were a huge number of them. In some places with lots of aquatic plants, they could be seen everywhere in large numbers. The flower of the milk tea flower was in the shape of a cup, every few days, nectar would fill to the brim of the cup. The nectar was sweet and delicious, it attracted countless bees and butterflies, it used them to spread the pollen of the milk tea flower. Of course, people could drink it too. Almost all Gu masters living in northern plains, or even mortals, had tasted this natural beverage. Actually, tea and alcohol were very popular drinks in northern plains, as well as the other 4 regions. In southern border, there were blue sea cloud tea bricks for sale. This tea brick was not produced in southern border, but eastern sea instead. E-Clan, one of the super forces of southern border, had a close relationship with eastern sea. Every year, they imported a huge number of blue sea cloud tea bricks and sold them for great profits. In central continent, there were even more types of tea. Like Spirit Affinity House's Qingpu tea, Myriad Dragon Doc's Dragon Shadow tea, they were very famous. Some tea were specialties of Gu immortals, only that specific Gu immortal could make it. For example, Fairy Li Shan's Snow Oil Tea, or Feng Jiu Ji's Jade Sea Tide Tea. Langya Land Spirit saw that Fang Yuan was not drinking it, he coughed and urged, Elder Fang Yuan, quickly drink it. You might not know, but this is the best way to drink this fire rainbow tea. Fang Yuan waved his hand, I have heard about fire rainbow tea long ago, but when I held this cup of tea, I suddenly thought of many things and was lost in my thoughts. Langya Land Spirit, then what was Elder Fang Yuan thinking of? Is there an issue with Langya sect developing in Taichou? No, not this. Fang Yuan smiled, he freely picked out something in his mind and used it as an excuse. Langya Land Spirit showed a look of disappointment, he replied, you are the owner of Spring Autumn Cicada, you came from the future and are very knowledgeable, you have experienced many things, and know a lot about tea. But do you know? Be it tea or wine, they have both been spread far and wide due to food path. Oh. Is that so? Fang Yuan was deeply interested. Or more accurately speaking, he was interested in food path. He was managing his immortal aperture now. The main goal was to have multiple resources that could satisfy the feeding requirements of his immortal Gu. But if he had methods of food path, it would be easier for him to feed his immortal Gu. Unfortunately, food path was very mysterious. There was only a short period in history when it flourished. Afterwards, it spread much less. It was rarer than wisdom path inheritances. It was on the brink of extinction. Regarding food path, Fang Yuan had learned some secrets during the Battle of Tian Mountain through Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's memories. The creator of food path was not a human Gu immortal, but a beastman Gu immortal. This was likely the reason why food path was in its current state. But to Fang Yuan, it did not matter who made this path, as long as it has use to him. Most human Gu immortals had a sense of racial pride and superiority, but Fang Yuan did not. If being a hairy man could help him reach the goal of eternal life, he would discard his human identity immediately without hesitation and become a hairy man. After realizing that Xianxia land spirit had some understanding towards food path, Fang Yuan continued to ask. Xianxia land spirit revealed, the creation of any type of tea or wine is actually an incomplete Gu recipe. If it is completed, a unique tea Gu or wine Gu would be refined. There are already many types of wine Gu or tea Gu, like the famous liquor worm and big smoke tea Gu. Liquor worm was a familiar one. Fang Yuan had used it after rebirth to grow rapidly. Big smoke tea Gu was a type of Gu worm that could make a Gu master addicted and become decadent. It was heavily suppressed by the people in power. It was a type of drug in this world. It is a pity that food path is facing extinction before it even became widespread. Right now, when many Gu immortals want to test their refinement path attainment, they do not need to join the Central Continent Refinement Path Convention. They can compete by making a cup of tea each, tasting and determining who is superior. Xianxia land spirit's answer disappointed Fang Yuan slightly. The land spirit did not know much. The contents were mostly about refinement path. Spectral Soul's main body definitely knows a lot of food path methods. After all, he had inherited a food path true inheritance in his life. Unfortunately, he is trapped in the giant dream realm now, and is being weakened continuously. It is too hard for me to get anything from him. This thought flashed across Fang Yuan's mind. Xianxia land spirit and Fang Yuan spoke for a while. He saw that Fang Yuan could not stop talking about tea. He got anxious and said openly, Fang Yuan, I will speak frankly. I invited you for tea because I have a mission for you. Here it comes. Fang Yuan thought. He looked at the land spirit. Please speak. The land spirit was straightforward. Fang Yuan had guessed his intentions long ago. As expected, Xianxia land spirit said at the next moment, you know about my plan to develop in Tai Chiu. You suggested it yourself, after all. There is also the transportation Gu formation, you placed it yourself. Because of your actions, recently, our Gu immortals could enter Tai Chiu smoothly and modify the environment to expand our base. But now, we have a problem. Fang Yuan nodded. First Supreme Elder is talking about the falling star hound. That's right. This damned ancient desolate beast injured several Gu immortals of our sect. I have already placed a mission to exterminate it, but everyone who took the mission returned in failure. I know that the only person who can beat this falling star hound is you, Fang Yuan. But why did you not take that mission? Xianxia land spirit asked directly. Fang Yuan smiled bitterly. I am very busy recently. He had his difficulties to deal with. More than a month had passed since the last earthly calamity. The next earthly calamity was coming. Fang Yuan was preparing for this earthly calamity now. But Fang Yuan was not going to tell Xianxia land spirit about the earthly calamity. In fact, he was keeping the sovereign immortal aperture as a secret from Xianxia land spirit. As long as he did not cause harm to Xianxia blessed land, it was not going against the alliance agreement of Xianxia sect. This secret was Fang Yuan's trump card. He was going to keep it hidden. Of course, Shadow Sect knew all about it. But Fang Yuan knew that Shadow Sect's plan was to take back sovereign immortal Fetus Gu. In this case, they were not going to expose the existence of the sovereign immortal aperture, because that was just causing more problems for themselves in the future, right? From Xianxia land spirit's perspective, it was very fortunate that Fang Yuan could revive and become a living person. As for the revival method, Fang Yuan had lots of excuses and explanations. He knew many ways for immortal zombies to revive after all. Fang Yuan's difficulties could not be said. Xianxia land spirit nodded, "You are very busy indeed." He was a land spirit, he knew everything happening inside Xianxia blessed land. Xianxia land spirit said, "You cultivate really hard, but completing the mission also helps you in your cultivation. Don't forget about dog shit luck immortal goo. To feed it, you need to find 6 types of desolate hounds and use their feces to feed this luck path goo worm. In the past, when my previous self fed dog shit luck, he made use of Treasure Yellow Heaven, purchasing from there. But now, Treasure Yellow Heaven is closed. Even after it reopens, I would suggest you rear some desolate hounds in your immortal aperture. You also know the benefit of doing this." Lord's words are truly enlightening. Fang Yuan immediately nodded. Dog shit luck was very important to him. Against heaven's will, luck path could be used. Fate and luck. Fate was predetermined, it could not be changed. But luck was ever-changing, it could be made of use. This precious information was obtained from the transactions between Fang Yuan and Shadow Sect. Fang Yuan's exploration was known by heaven's will, it caused a beast tide and tried to eliminate him. But at the crucial moment, Fang Yuan found an immemorial desolate corpse and used it to set up the formation. Thinking about it, Fang Yuan felt that this was not a coincidence, it was likely thanks to dog shit luck. This immortal goo had no use towards offense or defense, but its passive help was huge. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, Self Luck, All Living Beings Luck, Heaven and Earth Luck. Dog shit luck is among the key parts of the self-luck true inheritance, I am in possession of it. All living beings luck was hidden in Imperial Court blessed land, Connect Luck, Calamity Beckoning, and Fortune Rivaling Heaven were from there. What a pity. Fang Yuan had a scary guess recently. Imperial Court blessed land was destroyed because of him. Back then, he was influenced by Mo Yao's fake will, but was he unaffected by heaven's will? Did heaven's will use him as a tool to destroy Giant Sun Immortal Venerables all living beings luck true inheritance? From heaven's will's perspective, it had to take away surpluses while replenishing deficits. Fate was the best method that heaven's will had. After Fate Gu was broken by Red Lotus Demon Venerable, the power of luck path burst out, creating Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. Xianxia land spirit sat up, muttering, Elder Fang Yuan, if you can take this mission and complete it, regardless of whether you capture or kill the falling star hound, you will receive 800 sect contribution points. 800. Fang Yuan's eyes flashed. But next, he thought about it and answered, I'll have to say no. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1094, In this world, what is most important is myself. Chapter 1094, In this world, what is most important is myself. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan flew in the sky. Before leaving, he looked back at the cloud city behind him. He showed a bitter expression, he sighed deeply before flying away. Last time, he accepted Xianxia land spirit's mission to explore Tai Chiu, the land spirit was happy and the meeting ended well. But now, Fang Yuan rejected him, he did not accept the mission to take down the falling star hound, the meeting ended poorly. In Cloud City, Xianxia land spirit sat gritting his teeth. He held in his anger, he was holding the cup, but before he drank the tea, he smashed it towards the ground. Fang Yuan, this fellow. Xianxia land spirit clenched his fists, grinding his teeth, feeling very unhappy. However, he could see Fang Yuan's expression before leaving, the anger in him subsided a little. Fang Yuan, oh Fang Yuan, you might be really busy, cultivating so intensely and having your own plans. But this matter affects the development of Xianxia sect. You are a member of the sect. At the crucial moment, how can you not sacrifice yourself and defend the interest of the sect? You are an outsider after all. You are not a hairy man Gu immortal. Xianxia Land Spirit thought of this and squinted. There was a cold glint in his eyes. In his position, Xianxia Land Spirit could not force Fang Yuan to accept the mission if he did not want to. He created Xianxia sect. All of the members were under an alliance agreement. But there were no rules that would allow him to force members to do missions that they were unwilling to do. Of course, when Xianxia sect was in a life and death crisis, there were rules that would be enforced. But currently, Xianxia sect was developing Tai Chiu. It had nothing to do with fatal danger. If Fang Yuan was unwilling, there was nothing Xianxia Land Spirit could do. Xianxia Land Spirit could not sit. He stood up and paced around the room. His arms were behind his back, he lowered his head and pondered. He felt troubled and frustrated, his frown was growing deeper. Fang Yuan is unwilling to do it. What can I do about the falling star hound? Thinking about it hard, there were no good solutions. Xianxia Land Spirit himself could not leave Xianxia Blessed Land. There was another way, that was the ancient battle formation Heavenly Giant Solar. But Xianxia Land Spirit was in control of the most crucial immortal Gu that constituted the formation. Now that refinement cauldron, an immortal Gu house, was incomplete. This was one of the strongest remaining methods to protect Xianxia Blessed Land. Xianxia Land Spirit did not want to lend Heavenly Giant Solar over this situation. What if an unexpected mishap happened? Xianxia Land Spirit had a clear view of the circumstances. Sigh. Do I really need to do what Fang Yuan suggested? I might as well use this falling star hound as a grindstone and develop the fighting abilities of these hairy man Gu immortals. Xianxia Land Spirit sighed. Fang Yuan flew in the air, his clothing fluttered in the wind. Raging winds brushed past his face, the sound of the wind was clear and loud. He was cold and impassive on the inside. His bitter smile and sigh earlier were just an act. Fang Yuan knew. Inside Xianxia Blessed Land, Xianxia Land Spirit knew almost everything. He had a huge investigative range. Otherwise, he would not be able to collect so many lifespan Gu. Because Xianxia Blessed Land had existed since long ago, it had a deep foundation, and an uncountable number of Dao marks. This allowed Xianxia Land Spirit's abilities to be very developed in this blessed land. Other land spirits could not compare to him. My current plan is to rely on Xianxia sect to cultivate. I am the chess player, and Xianxia sect are my chess pieces. If I accept that mission, wouldn't I become the pawn myself, risking my life for Xianxia sect? Your reading on novel full thanks. Humph. Heavens will has its attention on Tai Chiu. It is very dangerous there. I suspect that Heavens will has already set a trap, but because it has not found me, and because of the immemorial corpse, it is biding its time. Fang Yuan was vigilant. In this situation, he was not going to go to Tai Chiu. He wanted to cultivate transformation path. He had to refine transformation path immortal Gu, and kill desolate beasts to get immortal materials. But he did not need to do these himself. Xianxia sect was trying to develop in Tai Chiu, it would do all these. Fang Yuan only needed to use his sect contribution points and stay behind to cultivate. Not mentioning the danger and the possibility of a trap from Heaven's will. Even if there were no such thing, Fang Yuan was not going to delay his own cultivation speed. In this world, what is most important is myself. Fang Yuan had a firm attitude. He was mentally prepared for this unpleasant meeting already. I will definitely not waste my time for Xianxia sect, but I need to handle my relationship with Xianxia Land Spirit well. If such arguments happen often, my relationship with Xianxia Land Spirit will worsen. At some point, Xianxia Land Spirit might be unable to control himself. He might chase me out of the sect or even kill me. For the current period of time, I still need Xianxia sect's power. At least, during this second earthly calamity, I need to borrow those water path immortal Gu. Fang Yuan calmly analyzed his situation. He had once been in conflict with the previous Xianxia Land Spirit and their relationship became icy cold. That was a mistake. Fang Yuan alerted himself not to make the same mistake again. Sometimes, if the situation permits, I can and have to try and help out. I am purely making use of Xianxia's sect to bring convenience for my cultivation. Only my own strength and cultivation level are dependable. Heaven's will could affect many things, but the extent of its influence was limited. Heaven's will was not a fake will, capable of directly colliding with the thoughts in one's mind to distort the results of their thinking. Heaven's will could not compare to fake will in that regard. After hearing about Heaven's will from Shadow Sect, Fang Yuan learned that Heaven's will was, in essence, simply a type of will. Heaven's will could, at most, make very subtle influences. Thus, Heaven's will used Fang Yuan as the tool to deal with Shadow Sect and Spectral Soul. It had not exposed itself, it created a huge scheme and progressed slowly, only towards the end did it bare its fangs. But at the Battle of Tian Mountain, Fang Yuan, based on his nature as half an otherworldly demon, broke free of Heaven's will's planning and resulted in the current outcome. Thus, to deal with Heaven's will, the best method was to raise one's cultivation level and strength themselves. For example, when Qizai chased after Fang Yuan, it was because Fang Yuan was a rank 6 Gu immortal, he was weaker. If Fang Yuan was rank 8, Qizai would not foolishly pursue him. Similarly, against the cloud beasts, if Fang Yuan had the strength, he could kill them easily. It was because he was weak that he had to escape and run away. Thus, even if earthly calamities and heavenly tribulations are the best timing for Heaven's will to get rid of me, I must face them without any fear. Every time I passed the calamities and tribulations, I would be one step closer to breaking free from Heaven's will's restrictions. I will grow stronger and stronger, until I can face it head on. When I become a demon venerable, when I am invincible in this world, what can Heaven's will do to me? Fang Yuan was aware of this, he was prepared for it. Returning to his cloud city, he was informed that a hairy man envoy had visited him. Fang Yuan met with this hairy man envoy. He was a rank 5 peak stage Gu master. Lord, this is something my city lord had ordered me to bring to you. The hairy man Gu master said respectfully. Saying this, he held up a wooden box with both hands. Fang Yuan received it but did not open the box. He took a look at this hairy man envoy. With just one glance, the hairy man Gu master felt his heart turning cold. It was as if his entire body was naked, all of his hair was shaved away, all of his secrets were exposed. From today onwards, you will stay here, I will guide you in the cultivation of enslavement path. Fang Yuan said slowly. Thank you, Lord Immortal, for your guidance. The hairy man Gu master quickly knelt on the floor, his body was trembling. You can go now. Fang Yuan had no interest in this rank 5 peak stage Gu master. After sending him away, Fang Yuan went to his room and cultivated. He opened the wooden box, there was an immortal Gu inside, it was the rank 6 beast enslavement immortal Gu. As it turned out, a few days ago, Fang Yuan felt that the relationship was close enough and the time was ripe. He made a suggestion to 12th Hair, wanting to borrow his beast enslavement immortal Gu, he was willing to pay for it using sect contribution points. Even though 12th Hair agreed, he did not accept the sect contribution points. He had another request. Not long ago, he had taken in a bloodline descendant from the continents below. 12th Hair had an intimate relationship with the grandmother of this descendant, and because he had good aptitude, 12th Hair wanted to nurture him. Because this descendant cultivated enslavement path, 12th Hair wanted Fang Yuan to guide him. Fang Yuan had no reason to reject it. In fact, this was better for him. After all, he had been using a lot of sect contribution points recently, cutting costs was good for him. Inside the immortal aperture, the snow and ice had stopped increasing in area. This meant, the earthly calamities ice and snow path Dao marks had fully displayed their influence, they had finished modifying the immortal aperture. Fang Yuan controlled the immortal zombie and carefully got close to a desolate beast snow monster. Inside the immortal aperture, because time flowed differently, since his last slaughter, a long time had passed already. The snow monsters had relaxed, thus, Fang Yuan could find a lone snow monster roaming outside. Beast enslavement immortal Gu. At Fang Yuan's will, he injected green grape immortal essence into this immortal goo. The desolate beast snow monster's body shook, it was as if it had been hit by an invisible force. But soon, it growled, it discovered the hidden strength path immortal zombie and attacked it. Failure, retreat. Fang Yuan immediately left. Normally speaking, with his current soul foundation, it was nearly certain that he could suppress this desolate beast snow monster. But the reality was different. As Shadow Sect had said, these lifeforms filled with heavens will cannot be controlled or enslaved by me. Keeping them is a major threat. Fang Yuan sighed. Even though he knew this from Shadow Sect's information, he was not going to be certain until he tested it for himself. If I could enslave them, I could control the desolate beast snow monsters to resist other tribulations, or sell them in treasure yellow heaven, those are good options. But now, I can only kill them. Wait. Maybe I can use self-will goo to get rid of the heavens will before using beast enslavement immortal goo. Fang Yuan had an idea. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1095, Ample Preparation. Chapter 1095, Ample Preparation. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. An hour later. The desolate beast snow monster only had its head left after Fang Yuan's attacks. Roar. Even with just its head left, the snow monster's fierceness did not drop, it growled at Fang Yuan, spitting out icy wind. Snow monsters were different from ordinary desolate beasts, they were formed from snow and ice, they were like cloud beasts, blood beasts, or mud monsters. Fang Yuan controlled the strength path immortal zombie, he snorted as he stood in front of the snow monster's head, his hand was placed on top of the snow monster's head. At once, a thin layer of ice covered the strength path immortal zombie's hand. Fang Yuan ignored it, he activated a huge amount of self-will goo. Self-will surged like a tidal wave, flowing into the snow monster's head. The snow monster's head was full of heaven's will. Fang Yuan's self-will entered and fought with heaven's will, it was like the clash of fire and water, they were irreconcilably opposed to one another. There was little heaven's will, but the self-will was unceasing. In a while, the heaven's will lost and was completely wiped out by the self-will. Bam! At the crucial moment, the snow monster's head exploded. A large amount of snow and ice scattered everywhere. The strength path immortal zombie Fang Yuan was controlling immediately was buried in snow. However, the explosion before dying had no destructive power. Soon, Fang Yuan manipulated the strength path immortal zombie to come out of the snow unscathed. But his expression was quite dark. Even if I use self-will and get rid of heaven's will, the result would be that the snow monster self-detonates, it cannot be subdued. But even if I could subdue it, I spent hundreds of self-will goo to cleanse just one snow monster's head, the cost is too high. Self-will goo was only a mortal goo, but it was rank 5. Furthermore, the self-will goo was not refined by Fang Yuan, he had asked the hairy man goo immortals to refine by paying contribution points. Because of this, the cost was higher to Fang Yuan. And most crucially, it costed his time. Fang Yuan had to injure a desolate beast snow monster, forcing it to be unable to move or resist him, before he could flood it with self-will and get rid of the heaven's will. One desolate beast snow monster might not take long, but Fang Yuan had so many snow monsters in many northern plains. With a greater number, the time needed would increase, his second earthly calamity was coming, Fang Yuan could not do this. Actually, even if I enslave the desolate beast snow monsters and sell them, it is dangerous. Back then, one of the first split souls of Shadow Sect, the goo immortal named Green, had researched the life and death immortal aperture in Earth Trench's super goo formation. A huge explosion occurred during his research, countless immortal materials were infested with heaven's will, Green avoided them like the plague. Because of that, he threw these immortal materials away. This firm attitude of his shows a huge problem. If I truly sell these snow monsters filled with heaven's will, there might be horrible series of consequences. After his attempt failed, Fang Yuan could only continue his previous plan to kill these snow monsters. He had to kill these snow monsters completely before the second earthly calamity. He even had to cleanse all of the heavens will hear, not a trace could be left. Ordinary snow monsters were cannon fodder, Fang Yuan could easily kill them, it was not a problem. But desolate beast snow monsters were harder to deal with, he had to spend some time. As for ancient snow monsters, they were even more troublesome. Fang Yuan started to miss Flying Sword Immortal Gu. With Flying Sword Immortal Gu as the core, the Immortal Killer move Sword Marks targeting death was extremely effectively in dealing with ancient snow monsters. Triple Layered Sword Wave was an attack with wide range, it was too wasteful to use against a single ancient snow monster. And using Triple Layered Sword Wave had a huge cost. Thankfully, Fang Yuan regained his Strength Path Immortal Gu, he could use the killer move Myriad Self once again. Strength Path had few requirements for Primeval Essence and Immortal Essence, Myriad Self First Style, Giant Hand required much less Immortal Essence to activate than Triple Layered Sword Wave. In the following period of time, Fang Yuan used his Strength Path Giant Hands to eliminate these ancient snow monsters and desolate beast snow monsters. He first used Beast Enslavement Immortal Gu to try and enslave a snow monster. After failing, the snow monster would be angered and fall into a frenzied state, cursing Fang Yuan endlessly. Fang Yuan immediately retreated, luring this snow monster away, before using Strength Path Giant Hands to kill them. This way, the other snow monsters would not be alerted. Earlier, when Fang Yuan attacked, the snow monsters would gather into groups, but now was different, the efficiency was higher. After enslavement path methods failed, the target would feel great hatred towards the Gu Master. Fang Yuan made full use of this. Earlier, Fang Yuan had tried other methods, but mortal enslavement path methods were too weak, and some wisdom path methods were useless due to heaven's will. Thus, the beast enslavement Immortal Gu that Fang Yuan borrowed was not useless after all. Days passed, less than 30% of the snow monsters were left. But there was less than 10 days until the second earthly calamity. Fang Yuan manipulated the Strength Path Immortal Zombie, coming to mini southern border in the Immortal Aperture. At a particular location, Fang Yuan's original Immortal Zombie body was placed. Even though I have my original Immortal Zombie body, I can only look at it, I cannot use it. Fang Yuan sighed, mobilizing Self-Will Gu as he placed his formation. After some time, a Gu formation using hundreds of Self-Will Gu as the core was created. This Gu formation was mainly for sealing. Fang Yuan obtained the method of setting up this formation from Shadow Sect. Using a large number of Self-Will Gu to seal Heaven's will. The Super Gu formations that Shadow Sect had in all 5 regions used this method. After inspecting it, and confirming there were no problems, Fang Yuan let out a sigh. Fang Yuan's immortal zombie body was at the center of the Gu formation, the Gu formation had completely sealed the Spring-Autumn Cicada inside. Spring-Autumn Cicada had originally been sealed by one of Heavenly Court's Gu immortals, Wei Lingyang. Xianxia was unable to activate Spring-Autumn Cicada and start again. Thus, he was trapped in Central Continent and could only trade with Fang Yuan. During the transactions, Xianxia returned Fang Yuan's immortal zombie body as well as Spring-Autumn Cicada. After obtaining it, Fang Yuan realized that Spring-Autumn Cicada was still sealed, it could not even consume the water of the River of Time. It was weakening, on the verge of dying. Fang Yuan had tried many methods but this seal was very powerful, he could not even obtain any information about it. Without other options, he could only give up on this. Not long ago, the method of the Rank 8 Restriction Path Gu Immortal, Wei Lingyang, seemed to have worn out. Spring-Autumn Cicada's seal was lifted, Fang Yuan knew that Heaven's will was hidden inside it, only refinement path methods could remove it. Fang Yuan did not dare to place this immortal zombie body outside. Storing it inside his own immortal aperture was safest. But Fang Yuan was afraid that during the second earthly calamity, the Heaven's will inside Spring-Autumn Cicada would coordinate with the calamity. Thus, he set up this Gu formation, sealing Heaven's will and preventing this threat from occurring. 3 more days passed, the snow monsters were completely eliminated from Fang Yuan's immortal aperture. Next, he used self-will to cleanse all of the Heaven's will. For this, Fang Yuan paid a huge price. Even though Giant Hand had a low cost, using it so many times meant his consumption was still very high. Right now, Fang Yuan did not have much immortal essence or immortal essence stones. Because Treasure Yellow Heaven closed, even though Fang Yuan had a lot of resources, he could not sell them. His Xianxia sect contribution points were also dwindling. Even though Fang Yuan could earn more from teaching the Hairy Man Gu Immortals combat techniques, Xianxia Land Spirit was making his own plans. He reduced the rewards of these missions while raising the reward of the Falling Star Hound mission. Treasure Yellow Heaven, when are you going to open? Fang Yuan waited for the opening of Treasure Yellow Heaven as he prepared for his second tribulation. There were 5 days until his second earthly calamity. Fang Yuan cleansed all of the heavens while inside, before going to Dang Hun Mountain. Using myriad self and other methods, he completely altered the appearance of Dang Hun Mountain. Next, using Pulling Mountain Immortal Gu, he moved Dang Hun Mountain into his sovereign immortal aperture. Earlier, Fang Yuan did not have landscape as before. He did not dare to do this, but now his worry was lessened greatly. Such a commotion caused Xianxia Land Spirit to show up. He asked nervously, "Elder Fang Yuan, what are you doing?" He was worried, because Dang Hun Mountain belonged to Fang Yuan. It was not like Luo Pa Valley. If Fang Yuan wanted to bring it away, he could not stop him. Fang Yuan had a glib tongue. He gave an excuse of his that was prepared long ago, saying he was going to leave Xianxia Blessed Land for some time. Xianxia Land Spirit believed what he said. He wanted Fang Yuan to exterminate the Falling Star Hound, but instead, he was going to leave with Dang Hun Mountain. Xianxia Land Spirit was very worried. Fang Yuan used this chance to exchange all of his sect contribution points. He even used Wisdom Gu as collateral to borrow a lot of Immortal Gu from Xianxia Land Spirit, and large amounts of Immortal Essence stones. He finally replenished his Green Grape Immortal Essence. Regretfully, up until Fang Yuan left Xianxia Blessed Land, Treasure Yellow Heaven did not open. Fang Yuan sighed, choosing to move a portion of the resources in his immortal aperture to Xianxia Blessed Land for safekeeping. So much resources. It seems that you are very skilled in managing an immortal aperture. Xianxia Land Spirit was a bit surprised at the amount of resources Fang Yuan had. But in fact, this was only a small portion. It was not even 30%. Fang Yuan was not going to move out all of his resources. Xianxia Land Spirit was not a fool. He would be suspicious of Fang Yuan's sovereign immortal aperture. With half a day until the earthly calamity descended, Fang Yuan used the transportation Gu formation to go to the northern icy plain. Even though the northern icy plain was created by reckless savage demon Venerable, and had lots of reckless savages true meaning, heavens will still existed here. Thus, Fang Yuan did not come here far in advance. The icy plain was huge. Fang Yuan casually chose a direction and picked a spot to place his immortal aperture. What would the second earthly calamity be? No matter what it was, the second earthly calamity's might would surely be greater than the first. Fang Yuan waited for it vigilantly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1096, Wind Flowers, Snow Moon. Chapter 1096, Wind Flowers, Snow Moon. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan wore a white robe, his black hair was flowing with the wind. He slowly descended into many northern plains within the sovereign immortal aperture. He was planning to undergo tribulation in this place again. The other areas had resources placed in them. Many northern plains only had this icy area, and most importantly, the snow monsters filled with heavens were all eliminated already. The sovereign immortal aperture had a huge space, but the calamities and tribulations only targeted Fang Yuan. Therefore, the tribulation would occur where he was located. The immortal aperture had already been placed. It was in northern plains. The tributary of the river of time in the immortal aperture linked to the river of time outside, and the rate of time inside greatly slowed down. First, he inspected his arrangements. There were large numbers of Gu worms placed in the sovereign immortal aperture. Most of them were Gu worms related to the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. Other than that, there was Dang Hun Mountain right beside Fang Yuan. Right now, Dang Hun Mountain looked completely different from before. Fang Yuan did this to prevent others from using fixed immortal travel to enter while he was undergoing tribulation. He got rid of this possibility before it could be used. During the first tribulation, Fang Yuan did not have Pulling Mountain Immortal Gu or Landscape as before, he could not bring Dang Hun Mountain him. But now, it was different. With Pulling Mountain, Fang Yuan could single-handedly drag Dang Hun Mountain into his immortal aperture. If he had to request for help from other Hairy Man Gu immortals, not only would he need to waste his sect contribution points, he would also need to let the Hairy Man Gu immortals into his sovereign immortal aperture, exposing his huge secret. With Landscape as before, he was not afraid that Dang Hun Mountain would be destroyed in the calamity. After all, the more severely Dang Hun Mountain was damaged, the fewer the guts Gu produced. After some inspections, Fang Yuan confirmed that his arrangements had no problems. Immediately, at his will, the entrance of the sovereign immortal aperture opened. Huff huff huff. A huge amount of heaven and earth chi entered the sovereign immortal aperture through the entrance. At once, there was a huge commotion, as if tidal waves were crashing in. This time, I brought in Dang Hun Mountain, increasing the burden on the sovereign immortal aperture, thus, there is more heaven and earth chi than last time. Heaven and earth chi rushed in fiercely. Fang Yuan also activated the Gu worms outside of his immortal aperture at the same time. He had already done this setup once before, Fang Yuan was quite familiar with it. While undergoing tribulation, Fang Yuan naturally used Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. First, the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture could, indirectly, weaken the earthly calamity's power. Second, it could draw out Reckless Savage's true meaning, helping Fang Yuan with his transformation path cultivation. Unlike the first tribulation, this time, many of the mortal Gu used for forming Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture belonged to Fang Yuan. He even modified Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture himself, making some slight tweaks. The modified Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture was one of the preparations Fang Yuan made for this tribulation. Even though his refinement path attainment level was not high, he had Grandmaster Wisdom path attainment level. His modifications were just icing on the cake, they were not crucial aspects. But as long as he continued his research, Fang Yuan was sure that he would make this killer move as suitable for himself as possible. After all, Fang Yuan could not always rely on Langya sect. Each time he underwent tribulation, he needed to borrow so many Gu worms from Langya land spirit, there was a huge cost in it. Fang Yuan modified Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture so as to break free from Langya land spirit's control in this aspect. A moment later, Fang Yuan completed his arrangements and began to use his immortal essence, activating his Gu worms. Green light shone, filling the entire immortal aperture, while connecting to the outside world. Gradually, a green hue appeared outside the immortal aperture, covering a huge surrounding area. Tens of thousands of green grape immortal essence beads were used, allowing Fang Yuan to activate the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. The second earthly calamity descended. The world rumbled, winds blew as clouds shifted. At first, there was only a mild wind, but soon, the intensity of the wind rose greatly. In the blink of an eye, a huge wind blew, it had the force to sweep the world and blow away all life. What tribulation is this? Fang Yuan stood on the peak of Dang Hun Mountain, awaiting vigilantly. Even though he had not recognized the earthly calamity yet, he could see that this earthly calamity was like last time, it was far beyond reason in terms of power. Intense winds blew, blowing the snow and ice on the ground up, causing the area to become obscured. The sovereign immortal aperture had few light path Dao marks to begin with, it was dim. With the raging winds and snow, Fang Yuan's vision became very limited. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding. What sound is that? Fang Yuan had already activated his methods to investigative, but he suddenly heard the sound of chimes from within the snow and wind. This strange scene made Fang Yuan frown slightly. Don't tell me, this is... A thought flashed in his mind. At this moment, the sound of chimes became louder, a huge green flower flew out of the wind, crashing into Dang Hun Mountain. This green flower was extremely fast. It was simply faster than lightning. After crashing into Dang Hun Mountain, a huge mark was left on Dang Hun Mountain. The mountain rocks along the way were all smashed into bits, before being blown away by the wind. Ding ding ding. Ding ding ding. Wind chimes rang again. At the next moment, 18 green flowers flew out and crashed into Dang Hun Mountain. They turned into dust, but 18 blemishes were made on Dang Hun Mountain. These are wind flowers. Fong Yuan's eyes were shining brightly. He confirmed this in his mind. Wind flowers were a type of wind essence. They were only produced in extremely intense winds. They had no roots and floated in the wind. They were large like horse carriages, they were light green in color and were extremely sharp. Ding ding ding. Fong Yuan had just recognized these flowers, when the next wave of wind flowers came again. The flowers were in greater numbers now, there were 40 to 50 of them. They were attacking from all directions, crashing into Dang Hun Mountain consecutively. Dang Hun Mountain's surface was impacted, dust and smoke rose, fragments of rocks were scattered by the wind and vanished. Fong Yuan quickly retreated, moving away from the mountain peak. He gritted his teeth, feeling slightly troubled. Last time, Heavens will created a large number of snow monsters, but I could fly and had the initiative. This time, Heavens will learn its lesson, it changed its tactics and used the wind flower tribulation on me. This was Fong Yuan's weakness. Fong Yuan's speed was lower than the wind flowers, and his defensive methods were only at mortal level. Thankfully, I moved Dang Hun Mountain here this time, otherwise, I'd have no place to guard myself, it would be terrible. Fong Yuan felt extremely glad. Landscape as before. He used his time path Immortal Gu, the blemishes on Dang Hun Mountain vanished, it returned to normal. But soon, at the next second, a barrage of wind flowers attacked again, smashing layers of the mountain's surface into pieces. This cannot go on. Activating Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture already used more than half of my immortal essence. Even though I am safe currently, I am expending a lot of green grape immortal essence. Restoring Dang Hun Mountain is merely prolonging the inevitable. Fong Yuan squinted, thoughts were churning rapidly in his mind. He had rich battle experience, he quickly thought of a countermeasure. Strength Path Killer Move, Myriad Self. Transformation Path Killer Move, Familiar Face. Immortal Gu Dark Limit. His body shook, he utilized his methods, as countless Fong Yuan occupied the whole of Dang Hun Mountain. One of them roared at the sky as all of the Fong Yuan phantoms rushed towards the winds outside of the mountain. At the same time, Fong Yuan's actual body used Familiar Face and Myriad Self to conceal himself, he turned into a rock on Dang Hun Mountain. With Change Form Immortal Gu, Familiar Face was closer to the original version, it was easy to use, having instantaneous transformations. It was unlike before, when Fong Yuan used a large number of Mortal Gu to replace the effect of Change Form Immortal Gu, causing Familiar Face to need a very long time to activate. After turning into a common rock, Fong Yuan did not rest, he used Dark Limit Immortal Gu, concealing his aura. Ding ding ding. A large number of wind flowers attacked the tens of thousands of Fong Yuan phantoms. The calamity's firepower became less concentrated, Dang Hun Mountain sustained less pressure than before. In a moment, Fong Yuan's myriad self phantoms were all exterminated by the wind flowers. Fong Yuan used myriad self again, summoning countless phantoms that charged out carrying his aura. The wind flowers scattered and danced in the wind, many phantoms were instantly destroyed. After some repetitions, Heavens will sensed Fong Yuan's tactic, as the wind flowers stopped paying attention to the Fong Yuan phantoms, they targeted their attacks at Dang Hun Mountain. Fong Yuan gritted his teeth, feeling the ill intent of Heaven's will. Dang Hun Mountain is my greatest sources of revenue, Heavens will wants to destroy it and ruin my future prospects. Thankfully, Fong Yuan had landscape as before. He had landscape as before to restore Dang Hun Mountain, but it could only let Fong Yuan maintain the situation, he would still be in a passive state. Green Grape Immortal Essence was rapidly expended. Triple Layered Sword Wave. Strength Path Giant Hand. Fong Yuan tried to counterattack, but the wind flowers were too fast, the two killer moves were ineffective. Especially Strength Path Giant Hand, even though it was powerful, it was too slow, it could not catch any wind flowers at all, unless the wind flowers came at it. Poison Breath. Fang Yuan breathed out dark purple poisonous gas that scattered with the wind. Large numbers of wind flowers wilted upon coming into contact with the poison. Fang Yuan showed great joy on his face. Poison breath was modified from the wisdom path killer move, harboring malicious heart. It used woman's heart as the core, it had many flaws and was of comparatively low value. Fang Yuan rarely used it. To think that it was so effective now. Under the effect of poison breath, the wind flower's offensive power lowered immensely. The winds were starting to slow down. A cold light shone on the entirety of Dang Hun Mountain. Fang Yuan raised his head and saw that in the sky, there was a crescent moon that appeared out of nowhere. Fang Yuan squinted, he muttered under his breath, "Snow moon." This crescent moon was pure white as snow, it shone down with a pale light, causing Dang Hun Mountain's temperature to fall. Soon, layers of frost began to cover the surface of Dang Hun Mountain. Fang Yuan felt like there was a weight on his heart, he thought, so this is not a wind flower tribulation, but a wind flower snow moon tribulation. The former is an earthly calamity, but the latter is a heavenly tribulation. This second earthly calamity is simply too absurdly strong. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1097, Undergoing Tribulation with Difficulty. Chapter 1097, Undergoing Tribulation with Difficulty. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Wind flower tribulation, snow moon tribulation, when alone, they were two different earthly calamities. When the wind flowers and snow moon were together, they formed a heavenly tribulation. The power was much higher, and the difficulty of passing the tribulation increases. The wind flowers were fast and hard to avoid, they were sharp and not easy to defend against. The snow moon gave off cold light that froze Gu immortals, making them slower, the two were a perfect pair. Fang Yuan was feeling heavy pressure. Actually, with his current strength, especially after the transaction with Shadow Sect, Strength Path and Sword Path became his main source of offense. Be it Strength Path Giant Hand or triple-layered Sword Wave, they could allow him to unleash rank 7 Gu immortal battle strength. It was possible to pass a heavenly tribulation. What created Fang Yuan's heavy mood was not the heavenly tribulation now, but his future progression. When Gu immortals undergo tribulations, they get stronger and stronger. Fang Yuan's second earthly calamity was in theory stronger than the first. But the second earthly calamity was already at heavenly tribulation level. Such an increase was simply too much. Theoretically, if this went on, how strong would his third and fourth earthly calamities be? A rank 6 Gu immortal faces an earthly calamity every 10 years, and a heavenly tribulation every 100 years. After 300 years, after 3 heavenly tribulations, they would become rank 7. That means, they would have 27 earthly calamities and 3 heavenly tribulations. And for Fang Yuan, after this second earthly calamity, he still had 25 earthly calamities and 3 heavenly tribulations. If his second earthly calamity was already at the level of a heavenly tribulation, what future would he have? If he projected this into the future, his earthly calamities would reach the level of grand tribulations. The light of the snow moon made Fang Yuan's face look pale. Even the thoughts in his mind were moving at a slower rate as a result. The snow moon gave off a cold light that not only slowed the Gu immortals' movement, but also their thoughts. Fang Yuan quickly used wisdom path methods to protect his mind. He was a wisdom path grandmaster, he could achieve this easily. This should not be. During Shadow Sect's transaction, Sixth Hair told me, even though earthly calamities get stronger each time, there is a limit to their power. As long as this is an earthly calamity, it will be within the range of an earthly calamity. Was he lying to me? He gave me false information. Fang Yuan frowned deeply. It was not impossible that they lied to him. But to Fang Yuan, thinking from the other side's perspective, they had nothing to gain from doing so. Because this was something that could be easily found out. And Shadow Sect wanted to capture Fang Yuan to reverse refine sovereign immortal fetus Gu, wouldn't it be a problem if they lied to him and caused him to die in this calamity? Or can I say, there is another possibility. Brightness flashed in Fang Yuan's eyes, before turning dim. The winds were howling outside. Fang Yuan raised his head, looking at the sky, his pupils were dark like the night sky. Standing on a mountain rock, his white robe and black hair fluttered in the wind, he was like a lone wolf. Triple-layered sword wave. Strength path giant hand. Suddenly, he burst out with a strong attack. Sword waves appeared out of nowhere, rushing up towards the sky, defying gravity. Strength path giant hands tore through space, pushing apart the wind with immense force. The two charged towards the snow moon in the sky. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding. Countless green wind flowers gathered towards the sword waves and giant hands like bees that were attracted to nectar. The sharp wind flowers clashed with the sword waves and giant hands. Soon, these two forces were eliminated. But there was a strange sight. Earlier, the wind flowers only targeted Dang Hun Mountain. They wanted to destroy this famous secluded domain of heaven and earth. They ignored Fang Yuan's sword waves and giant hands, even avoiding them on purpose. But now, these wind flowers went to attack them. It was because Fang Yuan's attack was aimed at the snow moon in the sky. It seemed like these wind flowers were trying to protect the snow moon. The snow moon's existence was indeed placing much pressure on Fang Yuan. It was not wrong that the wind flowers were protecting it. But excitement flashed across Fang Yuan's eyes. Myriad self. Myriad self. Myriad self. A group of phantoms roared, large number of Fang Yuan phantoms rushed up like a tidal wave. Fang Yuan used it 3 times, in an instant, Dang Hun Mountain which was originally empty, became extremely crowded. Countless Fang Yuan flew into the wind by jumping down the mountain. But unlike last time, Fang Yuan's true body also turned into a strength path phantom, rushing out of Dang Hun Mountain. Large numbers of wind flowers came at him. But there were too many strength path phantoms, and too few wind flowers. Fang Yuan's strength path phantoms could not resist the wind flowers, they were rapidly sacrificed. But using them to conceal himself, with familiar face and dark limit helping him, Fang Yuan successfully got into the sky. It is time. Sword escape. Fang Yuan found the perfect time to use sword escape Immortal Gu. He was like a dragon out of the water, he rushed into the sky and soared above the clouds, it was an astonishing sight. He was close. Fang Yuan used triple-layered sword wave and strength path giant hand again. Heaven's will was caught off guard, the wind flowers were still eliminating the Fang Yuan phantoms. Fang Yuan successfully destroyed the snow moon in the sky. At the next moment, large amounts of reckless savage's true meaning filled him. Fang Yuan was like a withering plant receiving water, he absorbed all of the true meaning. All of a sudden, he felt like he had transformed into a moon, he was hanging in the sky, quietly emitting moonlight as he looked down on the living beings of the world. His transformation path attainment level rose rapidly. Transformation path, it did not just include animals and plants, it also encompassed mountains, water, wind, moons, all of these natural phenomena. This true meaning of reckless savage gave Fang Yuan great gains. He laughed loudly, one could feel his joy from his laughter alone. As it turned out, the wind flower snow moon tribulation was just pieced together, it was not a true heavenly tribulation. The second earthly calamity was within the scope of an earthly calamity. No matter how angry Heaven's will was and how much it wanted to eliminate Fang Yuan, there was no use. It was Heaven's will, it had to obey the law of balance of the way of heaven. Winds roared, Heaven's will raged, as if it was embarrassed from having its plan exposed openly. Countless wind flowers assaulted Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan used myriad self again, large numbers of Fang Yuan phantoms diverted Heaven's will's offense. The wind flowers killed Fang Yuan phantoms, it was a true slaughter. But there was little effect, Fang Yuan's true body was hidden among the phantoms, eventually landing on Dang Hun Mountain again. With Dang Hun Mountain, he had a place to defend himself, Fang Yuan could catch a breather. Deactivating familiar face, Fang Yuan's body shook. There was a huge wound on his back, blood was dripping, his bones could be seen. But because of change form Immortal Gu, his wound was concealed, he managed to deceive heaven's will. My defense is too weak. Fang Yuan sighed, starting to heal himself. He did not use man as before. Man as before was an immortal Gu that used immortal essence. And it could only return him to his state a moment ago. Fang Yuan was hurt by a wind flower in the sky when he was flying. At that time, he could not use man as before. If the immortal Gu aura was leaked, he would be exposing himself. Thankfully, my Dao marks do not conflict, even mortal methods work well on me. Fang Yuan felt his immense advantage in this aspect. Normally speaking, Gu immortals were hard to heal. Because they had Dao marks, they would interfere and reduce the effectiveness of mortal healing methods. When using healing immortal killer moves, one also had to consider if the Dao marks conflicted. Fang Yuan had no such problems, he could use mortal methods, this allowed him to conserve immortal essence. Fang Yuan did not prepare as much immortal essence as last time. The main reason was the closing of treasure yellow heaven. Cold light assaulted him, frost formed on Fang Yuan's forehead. It spread and he was soon covered in a layer of frost. Not just him, the entirety of Dang Hun Mountain was the same. Fang Yuan looked up and his pupils shrunk, he mentally cried out in dismay. There were 3 more snow moons that appeared in the sky. With 3 times the cold light accumulated, the effect was multiplied. Fang Yuan's wisdom path method defending his mind stopped working, he could only use other ways to counter it. He also had to defend his body, multiple defensive mortal killer moves were used, his body flickered with light, his body temperature was maintained at a normal level. The number of snow moons and their rate of production exceeded Fang Yuan's expectations. This ruined his plan of sitting back on Dang Hun Mountain. Fang Yuan's heart beat quickly, when he saw the 3 snow moons, he realized, this was a crucial moment of life and death. The longer he dragged on, the more snow moons would appear, and the less hope he had of passing the tribulation. He had to counterattack, he could not slack on it, otherwise, when the opportunity fades, a slight delay would cause him to get into deep despair, there would be no way for him to survive. A different Gu immortal might hesitate, but Fang Yuan had rich battle experience, after realizing his situation, he used Myriad Self once again without hesitation. Doing the same thing again, large numbers of Fang Yuan phantoms lured the wind flowers away. Fang Yuan's body was mixed in with them, charging into the sky relentlessly. After flying towards the sky, the cold light's power rose, it was no longer restricted by Dang Hun Mountain's soul path Dao marks. This was an intense battle. Fang Yuan needed to destroy the 3 snow moons, but the cold light from them gave him much greater pressure than the wind flowers. And worst of all, a 4th snow moon was already forming in the sky. Heaven's will was going through all kinds of ways to stop Fang Yuan, while he had the best opportunity to attack, large numbers of wind flowers attempted to kill Fang Yuan. 1 moon, 2 moons, 3 crescent moons, Fang Yuan destroyed them after a difficult process. And more snow moons were still forming. The cold light made Fang Yuan feel a deep chill in his mind, the cruel reality was making his limbs go numb. His chances of surviving dwindling, but Fang Yuan's expression became more firm, he charged up against the difficulty without any dejection. His immortal essence was rapidly decreasing, every time he used an immortal killer move, he had to be careful about the expenditure and calculate it accurately. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1098, Success in Danger. Chapter 1098, Success in Danger. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Ding ding ding. A wind flower hit Fang Yuan's back. Fang Yuan's defenses were like paper, torn to shreds immediately. His robe on his back was cut apart, blood spewed as his flesh was dug out. I'm getting unlucky. Fang Yuan's heart sank. There were dozens of strength path phantoms around him, but there was only one wind flower attacking them. To think that he was the one who got hit. As time passed, dog shit luck's protection would get weaker, the chances of him being found out by heavens will increased. And worse, there was also Dark Limit Immortal Gu to take into account. Dark Limit Immortal Gu was activated, protecting Fang Yuan and concealing his aura, but it was weakening too. Once this protection vanishes, it would be more severe than losing dog shit luck's protection. Time passed, seconds passed like years to Fang Yuan. He was holding on desperately. He had already endured countless attacks from the snow moons and wind flowers. Dog shit luck and Dark Limit's protection weakened progressively, but Familiar Face, formed using Attitude Gu and Change Form Gu, was a reliable method that Fang Yuan was holding on to. There was also Myriad Self. At this moment, its attack power was useless, he could only use it as a distraction. Heaven's Will was not stupid, it could think. After understanding Fang Yuan's tactic, after he used Myriad Self each time, it could find him in a shorter time than the previous attempt. Fang Yuan's injuries were getting more severe, he had no choice but to use man as before. But this way, his immortal essence expenditure rapidly increased. He did not have much to begin with, now, it was depleting. Heaven's Will had the high ground controlling the earthly calamity, it was not going to lose out in this situation. While Fang Yuan was like an ant, desperately struggling to survive in this dangerous situation. The number of snow moons continued to increase, Fang Yuan was slowly unable to keep up. The situation was dire, Fang Yuan saw almost no hope. But he did not give up, he continued to grit his teeth and persevere. The winds were wild, seemingly mocking him for overestimating himself. The snow moons hung in the sky, the cold light seemed to be looking down at Fang Yuan. Seeing this, ant struggled desperately in futility. Fang Yuan was bathed in blood, his white robe had turned into a blood-red color, his blood and sweat had frozen because of the cold light. He was in a pathetic state, some of his black hair that fluttered with the wind had snapped, the length was now uneven, he looked like a combination of a beggar and a lunatic. His face was icy cold, he did not laugh nor shout. He was like a firm piece of ice, even if heaven and earth were burying him, he did not say a word, he endured silently in this desperate situation. The wind slowly became weaker. The power of the wind flower tribulation was fading. This was its limit. An earthly calamity's power had limits. Even if Heaven's Will amplified it to the greatest extent and personally manipulated it. Fang Yuan was not killed by the wind flowers, soon, the number of wind flowers decreased, there was no longer any wind. Fang Yuan smiled, he activated his immortal essence, targeting the snow moons. Even though the wind flowers were gone, and the snow moons had stopped forming, there were still some wind flowers left behind, and many snow moons in the sky. A tough battle. Fang Yuan had no strength to grit his teeth, he felt extremely weak. Myriad Self. Strength Path Giant Hand. Triple Layered Sword Wave. Familiar Face. He was not in a good condition, some of his immortal killer moves failed upon activation. Each time he failed, he faced a backlash and spat out blood from his mouth. The earthly calamity was at its limits, so was Fang Yuan. There was no reason to run now. Not only could the wind flowers stop him, the snow moons could fly slowly, the range of the cold light was too large. The earthly calamity was not over yet, heaven and earth chi was not balanced yet, it was impossible to retrieve his immortal aperture. Undeniably, Heaven's Will had planned this for some time, creating the most suitable tribulation to kill Fang Yuan. In the last earthly calamity, reckless savage true meaning was a part of the earthly calamity's strength. But this time, even though Heaven's Will could not stop it, it influenced reckless savage true meaning and turned it into the snow moon tribulation, increasing the difficulty of the entire earthly calamity. In this current situation, it depended on who could outlast the other. An hour later, Fang Yuan collapsed on Dang Hun Mountain. His immortal essence was depleted. He could no longer sustain Familiar Face, his mental energy was drained. Fang Yuan exerted his effort and strength, destroying a large number of snow moons, but there was still one final moon in the sky. Using Dang Hun Mountain's protection, Fang Yuan resisted the force of the cold light. He was covered in injuries, frost had formed on the surface of many of his injuries. Fang Yuan had no strength left, snow and frost accumulated on his body, turning him into a piece of ice. The final trace of wind was blowing on top of the ice, carrying Heaven's Will, wanting to take Fang Yuan's life away. He had no immortal essence left to use even one immortal killer move, but Fang Yuan showed the faint smile of a victor on his face. I finally survived this calamity. At the next moment, a desolate beast spine-fin star dragonfish appeared, it swung its tail and destroyed the final snow moon. Beast enslavement immortal Gu. A few minutes later, heaven and earth chi settled down. Fang Yuan quickly used his methods to leave northern plains. After he left, a while later, two figures emerged from below the ice. It's here. One of the figures inspected the place, saying this after it confirmed the surroundings. The other figure sniffed around with its nose, confirming as well, we did not sense wrongly, someone was undergoing tribulation here earlier, there is still some heaven and earth chi remaining, it has not completely dissipated yet. The two figures were indistinct, they were purposely concealing their figures. However, to be able to know about tribulations and to inspect them so clearly, they were surely Gu immortals. Sigh. The northern icy plain was created by reckless savage demon Venerable in the past single-handedly. This is an icy plain without any land. The heaven and earth chi here is less abundant than in other places. If many Gu immortals undergo tribulation here, more heaven and earth chi would be consumed. At some point, the glaciers will shatter, the entire place would become unstable. One of the two mysterious Gu immortals sighed as they spoke with much worry. The northern icy plain is the final paradise left for us snowmen. We live under the icy plain and do not conflict with the rest of the world. To think that the humans are not satisfied, they even want to take away this final sanctuary of ours. The other mysterious figure was younger and said with much anger. It turned out that these two Gu immortals were not simple, they were snowman Gu immortals of the variant humans. The young snowman Gu immortal continued, First Supreme Elder is too behind the times. In my opinion, we should have gotten rid of that Chu Du look, not only is Chu Du coming to undergo tribulations, others are coming too. Soon, more and more Gu immortals will come and destroy our sanctuary. The older snowman Gu immortal sighed, sigh. I understand why First Supreme Elder agreed. They are worried that a battle with Chu Du would expose our location to the world. Right now, humans are the overlords of the world, their status is firm as a mountain, unshakable. If we are exposed, all the Gu immortals in northern plains would come after us. Do we let this continue? Let more and more Gu immortals undergo tribulations on top of us. With our strength, if we fight in this icy plain, as long as we plan well, it is not hard to kill some human Gu immortals. Of course, I admit that Chu Du is very strong. We can play it safe and avoid him, but other Gu immortals are not hard to kill. If they all die, who will know we are the culprits? Ha! Humans are a chaotic bunch internally, the righteous path and demonic path have never stopped their conflicts. The young Gu immortal said. Sigh, you make sense too. Let's report this matter to the tribe and see what the other Supreme Elders have to say. The two snowman Gu immortals discussed as their vague figures vanished. Even though Fang Yuan was covered in wounds, he moved unceasingly, rushing back to Xianxia blessed land. Heavens will wants to exterminate me, the best chance is during my tribulations. Not only can it increase the might of the calamities and tribulations to their limits, it can manipulate them personally. And worse, it can influence other people and create a human tribulation to kill me. Fang Yuan remembered this detail clearly. This was precious information that he had obtained from transactions with Sixth Hair. In the Battle of Tian Mountain months ago, he was also part of the crucial human tribulation that heavens will use to deal with spectral soul. Because he had experienced it personally, Fang Yuan was very much on alert regarding these human tribulations. Look at who spectral soul was, and he had Shadow Sect and Zombie Alliance to assist him for 100,000 years, he still lost to heaven's will in the end. Compared to them, what was Fang Yuan? Thus, Fang Yuan disregarded his severe injuries, he immediately left. He was fast, not giving heaven's will any time to plan. There were no unexpected mishaps along the way, Fang Yuan successfully returned to Xianxia blessed land. After he got to Xianxia blessed land, he let out a sigh, knowing that he was safe for now. Next, Fang Yuan hid inside his cloud city and healed his injuries, while returning all the immortal Gu he borrowed. A few days later, Fang Yuan's injuries healed, he was in prime condition again. He started restoring Dang Hun Mountain, which was in his immortal aperture. Speaking of which, this mountain was a huge help when he was undergoing tribulation. Dang Hun Mountain was in a terrible condition. It was a huge mountain earlier, but after getting attacked by countless wind flowers, there was only a tiny mound left. Landscape as before. Using this immortal Gu, Dang Hun Mountain regained its former size. Only when Dang Hun Mountain was in this state could it produce Guts Gu at the highest efficiency. Fang Yuan did not dare to be careless. He quickly took out Dang Hun Mountain and handed it over to Langyip Blessed Land. However, even though he could mass-produce Guts Gu, the place to sell them, Treasure Yellow Heaven, was still closed. Right now, Langya Sek's inventory had a huge amount of Guts Gu that could not be sold. Fang Yuan was anxious. 2 months later, the third earthly calamity will arrive. It will be stronger than now. If I do not obtain a breakthrough in any aspect during this period of time and gain more strength, I will likely die. But gaining strength does not come out of nowhere. I need all sorts of cultivation resources. Treasure Yellow Heaven, when is it going to open? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1099, Transformation Path Grandmaster. Chapter 1099, Transformation Path Grandmaster. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Inside the Sovereign Immortal Aperture. Mini Eastern Sea. This was a place with an aquatic terrain. But it was not as vast as the Eastern Sea in the outside world. The deepest sea level was only 60 feet. Most of the places were like mud pits to desolate beasts. This was because the Sovereign Immortal Aperture did not have enough water path Dao marks yet. Right now, in a particular location of Mini Eastern Sea, 2 desolate beasts were fighting. Howl. The desolate beast shark fin wolf howled as it pounced. It opened its mouth, showing its fangs. If its attack landed, even mountains could be damaged. But its opponent was a desolate beast flying bear. A crafty light shone in its eyes as it retreated. The shark fin wolf exerted excessive strength. Its attack was easily dodged by the flying bear. Next, the flying bear raised its paws and slammed down at the shark fin wolf's head. Bam! A huge force threw the shark fin wolf onto the ground. It went into a daze from the impact. It could not get up. However, Fang Yuan was not satisfied with this result. When I used Flying Bear Strength Immortal Gu earlier, my strength increased. But the Flying Bear transformation had an issue. I am temporarily using this Strength Path Immortal Zombie body. It has a lot of Strength Path Dao marks on it. Even though I have changed form Immortal Gu, I can only change my appearance with difficulty. The Strength Path Dao marks are resisting the effects of change form Immortal Gu. Transformation Path Gu Immortals mainly had Transformation Path Dao marks in their bodies. These Dao marks could transform into Dao marks of other paths under the influence of Gu worms. Change form Immortal Gu was the essence of Transformation Path. With it, the Gu Immortal could transform into anything. Flowers, birds, fish, insects, grass, trees, mountains, rivers, suns, stars, moons, they could become anything. But this Gu only changes the form. Other Gu worms had to be used to change the strength, speed, defense, and other aspects. Right now, the Sovereign Immortal Aperture is inside my body. I can only use the Strength Path Immortal Zombies and train my Transformation Path methods. But Strength Path Immortal Zombies have Strength Path Dao marks. It is hard for them to use Change Form Immortal Gu. But Flying Bear Strength Gu gains an amplification from Strength Path Dao marks. It has a greater effect. Fang Yuan assessed this, realizing the usefulness of his current body. Non-interference and conflict between his Dao marks. This was an immense advantage. Between all paths, they had clear boundaries that separated them. Even if one cultivated more than one path, there was a difference between the primary and secondary path. But for Fang Yuan, the boundaries were indistinct. He could cultivate all paths. It seems that using strength path immortal zombies can only train my transformation path methods to some extent. It cannot let me understand the true extent of my abilities. Fong Yuan sighed, controlling the flying bear, dodging agilely. As it turned out, the desolate beast shark fin wolf had gotten up, it attacked in a frenzied state. But Fong Yuan had the intelligence of a human, he utilized battle tactics and manipulated the flying bear fluidly. The shark fin wolf could not even injure the flying bear. Even though Fong Yuan had beast enslavement immortal Gu and controlled this desolate beast before, after the earthly calamity, Fong Yuan had to return beast enslavement immortal Gu. Thus, before this, he had released his control over the shark fin wolf and spine fin star dragonfish. This had a benefit. Without beast enslavement immortal Gu, the desolate beast shark fin wolf could unleash its true fierce nature. It was a good sparring partner. Bam! With another loud sound, the shark fin wolf was slammed into the mud pit by the flying bear's paws once again, as mud splashed all over. This time, the shark fin wolf whimpered, it got up quickly, seeing that the flying bear was unharmed, it quickly escaped timidly. Fong Yuan, who was anticipating the shark fin wolf's attack, was dazed. He thought, was it because I was too harsh when flicking it to subdue it in the past? Its ferocity is greatly reduced as a result. The shark fin wolf escaped. Fong Yuan lost all interest in continuing. But my practice these last days was not in vain. It proved that my transformation path attainment level has indeed reached Grandmaster level. Transformation path Grandmaster. Right now, Fong Yuan was a Grandmaster in Blood Path, Strength Path, Wisdom Path, and Star Path. A fifth path, Transformation Path, had also become Grandmaster level. The 500 years of his previous life were not of much help to Fong Yuan here. His transformation path attainment could reach this level because of Reckless Savage's true meaning. Heavens will wanted to exterminate Fong Yuan, it planned and raised the power of his calamities and tribulations to the limits permitted by the way of heaven. Fong Yuan had passed 2 earthly calamities, but these earthly calamities were extraordinarily powerful, they were on par with heavenly tribulations. Thus, even Reckless Savage's true meaning was drawn out in a greater amount. Good fortune and misfortune came in turns. Calamities and tribulations had a rule, that was the balance of fortune and misfortune. The stronger the calamities and tribulations, the greater the danger Fong Yuan faced, but after passing the tribulation, he would receive much greater benefits. Fong Yuan's transformation path Grandmaster attainment was obtained after 3 infusions of Reckless Savage's true meaning. The first was when He Lu Lan ascended to a 10 extreme immortal, the latter 2 times were inside his own earthly calamities, drawn out using immortal tribulation tempering aperture. He could become a Grandmaster because his foundation had been accumulated sufficiently. Becoming a transformation path Grandmaster is good news, but my current situation is quite bad. Fong Yuan was worried. Calamities and tribulations grew stronger each time. After the second earthly calamity, Fong Yuan could guess how much stronger his following calamities and tribulations would become. The second earthly calamity was passed after an extremely dangerous process. Along the way, the snow moons started appearing. If Fong Yuan was not resolute and attacked them immediately, the outcome would be disastrous. Towards the end, Dang Hun Mountain was reduced to a small mound. He had so little immortal essence he could not even use one immortal killer move, he only passed because of the desolate beast he prepared. It could be said, Fong Yuan expended almost all of his trump cards. During the first earthly calamity, Reckless Savage's true meaning took over half of the calamities and tribulations' power. The snow monsters created by Heaven's will did not hold the initiative. But during the second earthly calamity, Heaven's will planned and plotted while involving Reckless Savage's true meaning, making use of it, influencing it to become the snow moons that amplified the power of the wind flower tribulation. Heaven's will can think, in the third earthly calamity, it will definitely consider Dang Hun Mountain, my current immortal killer moves, and my desolate beasts, as well as even subordinates like Gu Immortal Zhou Zhong. Know yourself and your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Fong Yuan had gone through some tribulations, he gained a deeper understanding towards Heaven's will. Conversely, the same applied to Heaven's will, it gained more and more information regarding Feng Yuan. Currently, Feng Yuan had 7 main methods against the tribulations. The first was to undergo tribulation in the northern icy plain, using immortal tribulation tempering aperture to lure out reckless savage true meaning, weakening Heaven's will's control over the tribulations. The second was dog shit luck, using luck path to weaken the tribulations. The third was using attitude Gu, dark limit Gu, change form Gu, and familiar face to transform into various things that could confuse Heaven's will. The fourth was his strength path, sword path, and blood path immortal Gu, as well as immortal killer moves that could resist it head-on. The fifth was Dang Hun Mountain, it gave him an advantage in terrain. The sixth was his status as a complete otherworldly demon, Heaven's will could not influence Feng Yuan's cognition. The seventh were external forces. Like the spine-fin star dragonfish, shark-fin wolf, featherman Gu immortal Zhou Zhong, Xianxia sex hairy man Gu immortals, and others. Heaven's will knows clearly about these methods and trump cards. At most, the seventh point has greater room for variance. But these external forces are unreliable. My enslavement path attainment level is not high, I am not skilled in enslavement path methods either. Even though I can enslave the shark fin wolf and spine fin star dragonfish, Heaven's will can also use the tribulations to grant them freedom, thus, during the tribulation, I can only set them up as a trump card, to prevent Heaven's will from making use of them. And the featherman Gu immortal Zhou Zhong, he is a variant human Gu immortal, he has abundant intelligence, if he regains freedom, he would be a bigger threat than desolate beasts. Unless I have no choice, I will not expose the secret of my sovereign immortal aperture to him. And most importantly, he had once used heavenly wish to descend into Tai by blessed land as an earthly calamity. If he was manipulated by Heaven's will like those snow monsters and betrayed me, that would be problematic. At this rate, my third earthly calamity will be a near-death experience, and the fourth earthly calamity would be a certain death situation. Feng Yuan was deeply aware of his circumstances. Even though he passed the second earthly calamity, treasure yellow heaven was not open, he could not use any cultivation resources to increase his strength. This was the problem with Gu immortals undergoing tribulation. The calamities and tribulations get stronger each time, they had to work hard and cultivate, to ensure that the growth of their strength could match the increase in strength of the calamities and tribulations. Gu immortals with lower potential would face weaker calamities and tribulations, there was a long time between each one, it was not hard for them to cultivate. But Feng Yuan's potential was unprecedented and possibly never surpassed, he had the sovereign immortal aperture that could cultivate all paths. Thus, his calamities and tribulations were so terrifying, the growth in their strength was unheard of, and there was only 2 months between each tribulation. Other Gu immortals would have died already, because Feng Yuan had a deep foundation and a huge amount of resources saved up, he could last until now. Look at the number of immortal Gu and immortal killer moves Feng Yuan had, his grandmaster attainment level in multiple paths, and even Dang Hun Mountain and Xianxia sect, these external forces that he could use. But even so, his future was bleak. Treasure yellow heaven is closed, it completely breaks my plans and momentum. At this rate, I cannot survive. The problem was treasure yellow heaven. If treasure yellow heaven opened, he would have a smooth journey ahead. But when was treasure yellow heaven opening? Nobody knew. It could open in the next moment, or several months later. In Feng Yuan's case, if it took a few months to reopen, he would be dead already. Unless he had a fortuitous encounter and gained a huge boost in strength. Days passed, but there were no signs of treasure yellow heaven opening. Feng Yuan's injuries had recovered, but his immortal aperture could not develop. Xianxia sect's development was also halted. Xianxia land spirit had asked Feng Yuan many times to settle the matter of the falling star hound. But Feng Yuan did not agree, their relationship was getting worse. Xianxia land spirit reduced the rewards of Feng Yuan teaching the hairy man Gu immortals combat skills to the lowest, he was making almost no gains. Under Sixth Hair's instigation, the other hairy man Gu immortals were also turning cold to Feng Yuan, they even started hating him. Even though the second earthly calamity was over, Fang Yuan's situation was getting worse. Should he wait until Treasure Yellow Heaven opened, or attempt to take the initiative and find a breakthrough? Fang Yuan was faced with a difficult problem. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1100, Hey Tribe takes the blame. Chapter 1100, Hey Tribe takes the blame. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan thought about it for a long time. He chose to wait. After the second earthly calamity, he gained a deeper understanding of heaven's will. Over at Tai Chiu, it seems peaceful, but heaven's will has likely already made its plot, waiting for me to jump in. Earlier, Langya's sect was developing smoothly in Tai Chiu. It was likely heaven's will's bait. Next, the falling star hound appeared. It was heaven's will's probing and pressure. It is attempting to use Langya's sect to force me out. This means, I definitely cannot go. Or maybe Fang Yuan was just overthinking it. Maybe heaven's will was not so omnipotent. Or maybe heaven's will has not started plotting in Tai Chiu yet. Fang Yuan thought about these, but he eliminated all these wishful thoughts. He could survive until now because of his vigilance, and the fact that he did not leave things to chance. He always planned for the worst outcome. Placing no expectations on the love of others, not longing for anyone to be kind to him, not expecting himself to be favored by fate. Relying entirely on himself. Waiting. Fang Yuan settled down, awaiting the opening of Treasure Yellow Heaven. After considering all aspects, this was the most advantageous and stable choice for him. Time continued to pass. Half a month soon passed, but Treasure Yellow Heaven still had no change. Sixth Hair was sowing discord everywhere. The hairy man Gu Immortal's attitude towards Fang Yuan was getting worse. Some were pointing at Fang Yuan in the face, scolding him for being a traitor. Even though he joined Langya's sect, he was not contributing it. I have a reason for everything I do. Fang Yuan explained plainly. After that, he stayed in his cloud city and rarely moved around. He also accepted very few requests to guide the hairy man Gu Immortals in fighting. Because the rewards were simply too little after Langya Land Spirit's adjustment. He could not develop his immortal aperture, and it was difficult to become proficient in transformation path methods. Fang Yuan did not waste his time. He used wisdom path methods to make many deductions. But without the light of wisdom, Fang Yuan felt a strong contrast. His deductions took a long time. It was very different from using the light of wisdom. The difference was like that of heaven and earth. Why would I care about the attitude of others? As long as I am in Langya's sect, and do not break any sect rules, would Langya Land Spirit break his own rules and remove my external Supreme Elder status? Unlikely. Fang Yuan continued to wait. Even though the environment exerted great pressure on him, he was unmoved. Northern Plains, Myriad Bean Garden, more than 10 days later. This place had fertile soil and good sunny weather. There were fields for farming with lots of irrigation channels that were orderly arranged. Chu Du came here and looked around. He felt his emotions calming down. He said loudly, Xianxia Xian, you are indeed the #1 wisdom path Gu Immortal in Northern Plains. The outside world is already in a mess, but you are still here farming and living peacefully. You are truly an unfettered expert. There were thousands of square kilometers of farmland, with many figures that had their backs lowered and farming. Most of them were ink men. They had dark skin and white hair. They were a type of variant human. One of them was a human. He looked like an old farmer with a hunched back, 50 to 60 years old with wrinkles on his face. His rough hands were grabbing onto 2 special beanstalks. His pants were rolled up as he stood on mud. He had no demeanor of an immortal. He really looked like an ordinary old man. But after hearing Chu Du's words, he raised his head, straightening his back. Facing the famous domination immortal, he had no fear or unease. He smiled lightly. Chu Du, you are flattering me. How can I be the #1 wisdom path Gu Immortal in Northern Plains? There is a mountain taller than another mountain, an expert above another expert. there are so many hidden experts in Northern Plains. Even though I inherited old immortal Tian Yuan's true inheritance, I could not learn much and had a weak foundation. Back in the day, I competed with Dong Fang Chang Fan and lost to him by miles. There is no way I am number one. This wisdom path Gu immortal Xianxia Xian was originally immortal, he was not even a Gu master. But under a coincidence, he obtained an immense opportunity from an immortal. Eventually, he inherited the true inheritance of a famous person in history, the wisdom path great expert old immortal Tian Yuan, becoming a wisdom path Gu immortal secretly. Back then, when Dong Fang Chang Fan tried to develop his clan and lead Dong Fang tribe on a strong rise, he had to infringe on other people's benefits. Even though Xianxia Xian obtained a true inheritance and became a Gu immortal, he had ordinary aptitude, his immortal aperture was ordinary and his calamities and tribulations were not powerful. Because of his personality, he had no grand ambitions. He was originally cultivating peacefully at home, but when Dong Fang tribe expanded, they interrupted his peaceful lifestyle. Even though Xianxia Xian was unwilling to, Dong Fang Chang Fan was very overbearing. After losing to Dong Fang Chang Fan, he could only leave Myriad Bean Garden and roam outside. During this period, he interacted with other Gu immortals and slowly, the Northern Plains Gu immortal world learned of his existence. After Dong Fang Chang Fan died, Dong Fang tribe's base was taken down, countless resources were snatched away. As a super force, Dong Fang tribe was like the setting sun, fading out of existence rapidly. Without Dong Fang Chang Fan, Dong Fang tribe collapsed. Xianxia Xian used this chance to return to his former home, becoming the owner of Myriad Bean Garden. Even though he had ordinary aptitude, his true inheritance was very impressive. Many Northern Plains Gu immortal promoted him, considering him to be the number one person under Dong Fang Chang Fan. After Dong Fang Chang Fan died, he naturally went up in status, and was now publicly recognized as the number one wisdom path Gu immortal in the Northern Plains Gu immortal world. But he had no ambitions or desires, he wanted to be ordinary. Even as a Gu immortal, he did not want to give up on his original life. He went to the fields to farm daily. Of course, Myriad Bean Garden was huge, most of the labor was done by ink men. Xianxia Xian raised inkmen slaves, he was quite famous in the Northern Plains Gu immortal world for this. Chu Du smiled, walking towards Xianxia Xian. Brother Tian is too humble. If I had Brother Tian's wisdom path attainment, I would call myself number one already. In the whole of Northern Plains, I would like to see who can compete against me. Xianxia Xian squinted his eyes, he laughed heartily. Brother Chu, you carry yourself like a dragon or tiger, you are a domineering person among immortals, you have grand ambitions, I cannot compare to you. Well, do you also want to reap some benefits from He tribe? You came here today to ask me to make deductions for you. Chu Du nodded, but shook his head a moment later. He tribe is about to be destroyed, like the former Dong Fang tribe. Right now, almost all forces in Northern Plains Gu immortal world are attacking and plotting against He tribe. However, I do not want to interfere in this. I came here with an even more important matter to ask Brother Tian to deduce. Xianxia Xian showed a look of admiration on his face, impressive. As expected of domination immortal Chu Du, you are unfazed by the trends of the world and stick to your own goals. What do you want me to deduce? I want you to make deductions about a person. This is the clue. Chu Du said, handing an immortal Gu to Xianxia Xian. This immortal Gu looked like a silver-winged dragonfly, its wings were flickering with silver light. Xianxia Xian felt a cold chill looking at it. A rank 7 sword path immortal Gu. He was slightly taken aback. Suddenly, his body shook with a mystical aura. He answered himself, flying sword immortal Gu, Bo Qing once used it. As expected of Xianxia Xian, that is the case. Chu Du praised, stating his intent. He wanted to obtain the immortal tribulation tempering aperture method from Fang Yuan, to lure out infusions of reckless savages' true meaning, assisting him in cultivation. Compared to the immortal tribulation tempering aperture method, his method of nurturing strength path Gu masters to become Gu immortals was too slow and inefficient. Even though he had Fang Yuan's flying sword immortal Gu, he could not match him in speed. he could only negotiate with him. But after that, Fang Yuan left. Even though he gave Chu Du a contact method, Chu Du received few replies from him. Even when Fang Yuan replied, he was just giving half-hearted replies. Chu Du was getting more anxious. Especially in the last few months, when Treasure Yellow Heaven closed, Chu Du lost all ways to contact Fang Yuan. Chu Du was also anticipating the opening of Treasure Yellow Heaven, but when he thought about it, even if Treasure Yellow Heaven opened, Fang Yuan might still ignore him. It was quite unbelievable. What sort of person was Chu Du? He actually had to wait for a Gu immortal to reply to him. But the immortal tribulation tempering aperture method was very important. It was a way for Chu Du to cultivate. Chu Du ignored even the events in He tribe. He went to Xianxia Xian to use his methods to deduce Fang Yuan's location. Since you are ignoring me, I will find you myself. Chu Du was thinking like this. This was the demeanor of the domination immortal. Xianxia Xian continued deducing. A moment later, he said, "Good. This immortal Gu still belongs to the target, you did not forcefully refine it. This way, I have a 50% chance of deducing the other party." Chu Du frowned, only 50%. If he is hiding inside an immortal aperture, I definitely cannot deduce anything. 50% is very high already. Xianxia Xian said. Chu Du nodded helplessly. Then I will trouble Brother Tian. Let's go to another location. I need 3 days. Langya Blessed Land. Fang Yuan returned to his cloud city. Earlier, he was summoned by Langya Land Spirit. He was not asking him to deal with the falling star hound. Instead, something huge was happening in northern plains. He tribe. Fang Yuan muttered, his gaze flickering. He tribe was facing a destructive crisis. They were in dire straits. Speaking of which, Fang Yuan was among the main culprits for it. Looking at the situation, Fang Yuan caused the collapse of 88 Truyang building. He destroyed Imperial Court Blessed Land and caused Northern Plains Righteous Path to be furious. They were trying to find him. But at that time, with Shadow Sect helping him, along with Fang Yuan's own efforts, they could not find him. Next, He Qing joined Shadow Sect. Shadow Sect and Feng Jiuji's group fought in the 100 Days battle in Luopa Valley. He Qing left behind the immortal Gu House dark prison and escaped, being captured by Fang Yuan. Next, Blazing Heaven Demoness dealt with old ancestor Xuehu. They came to an agreement. Blazing Heaven Demoness forced He tribe's top 4 supreme elders, who were using Green City Rampage, to retreat, and old ancestor Xuehu used the chance to steal immortal materials from He tribe's headquarters, earning a huge fortune. Finally, in the Battle of Tian Mountain, Shadow Sect was destroyed. Nobody could protect Fang Yuan from deductions anymore. His secret was exposed by Heavenly Court to the entire world. The truth of Imperial Court Blessed Land was revealed. Northern Plains Gu immortals wanted to get rid of Fang Yuan, but they could not find his location. Firstly, Wisdom Path Gu immortals were very rare, and secondly, Fang Yuan had been hiding inside Langya Blessed Land the entire time. Finally, this fellow also had quite a high attainment in Wisdom Path himself. Northern Plains Gu immortals could not find He Lulan or Tai Bai Yunsheng. Fang Yuan was the main culprit, they were the accomplices. Right now, they were within Wuxia. Central Continent's Heavenly Court struck but could not capture them. Northern Plains Gu immortals were furious. Especially the Righteous Path Gu immortals, and those super forces who dominated territories, the Huang Jin tribes. Their lives was originally great. Using the arrangement of their ancestor Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, they could bully those demonic path or lone immortals, playing the game of the Imperial Court contest every 10 years, it was quite exciting. In all, the Righteous Path flourished, and the Huang Jin tribes dominated Northern Plains. The situation could not be shaken. But Imperial Court Blessed Land was destroyed, 88 Truyang building collapsed, this beautiful setup broke apart utterly. They could not find the culprit or the accomplices, so they went to He tribe. He Lulan was a member of He tribe after all. Who else but He tribe could take the blame now? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know each report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible.